I would like to thank my patrons supporting the channel and the creation of these videos. In this video we are going to create a simple schematic to fade in out our flying text and move it upward, and we are going to call it flying text mover. So let's start by opening up Makinom editor, and let's navigate to schematics. It is worth to mention that when using the schematic to animate flying text, the UI of the flying text is available as a local selected data via selected key UI lowercase. That's in case we want to utilize the UI itself. So let's start our schematic by adding a node, change UI offset, and if we select this node, we can see down below that the data key is already set to UI. We are going to use this node to set or fade the offset of the UI element from our flying text, but it also can be used for fading the offset of UI boxes or HUDs. Let's link it up. And from here we want to change the vector tree type of the offset, vector tree type, value, and let's change the value in the Y to 100 units. We want to enable the fade, and we want to make sure wait is disabled. Then in the time value we set it to 3 seconds, and in the interpolation we can leave it as linear. Data key is already set to UI and the data origin to local, so that is okay. Before continuing, let's just save our schematic and let's navigate into our tutorial assets. We have a schematics folder here, and let's call this one flying text mover. The next node we want to add is change UI color. So let's start typing here, change UI color, and let's link it up like so. So this node, generally speaking, is used to change or fade the color of UI elements, in this case our flying text, but also can be used for change the color of UI boxes or HUDs. In this case we are going to do just a short fade in the alpha value of the UI. For that, let's select in the fade property, instead of none, let's select fade. This open up a new set of properties, so we can disable or make sure wait is disabled. Then in the time value we leave it as 1.25, so quarter of a second is good enough. Interpolation we can leave it as linear. Then in the fade alpha, make sure it's enabled, and we have disabled all of the color red, green and blue boxes. From the start color we make sure that the first one, alpha, is set to 0, which it is, and the end color is set to alpha 1 or 225. Once again, our data key is set to UI and the data origin to local. So let's save the schematic and continue. After we have changed the offset and the color, we add a wait node. Let's link it up, and in this case let's wait for about 2 seconds, 0.75. So overall, you remember that here we faded for 25 quarter of a second. and overall we want it to be visible for 3 seconds at the end. Next we can make another change UI color, so make it or hide it. So what we can do is just to copy this one, copy, and link it up after our wait node. And in this case we actually want to wait for the time specified here, so a quarter of the second, and we want to do the opposite about the alpha settings. So in the start color we change this to 225 or 1, and from the end color we change it back to 0, so it will be invisible. So let's say back the schematic, and if we want to use how to use this schematic for our plain text, so that is in the status settings, and then we go to status value, and let's say for example the HP. In the HP status value settings we have this UI settings node or section, and down below we have flying text settings, so we can add a new flying text. At this point we are telling that we want to use a flying text for either the player, ally or enemy, and then we have several status changes or settings here, so either to refresh the HP or critical refresh damage, and each of these have a specific section to allow displaying a flying text. So for example, for the refresh we want to display our flying text. Here is the place where we set the sprite that is going to be shown in the prefab, in the icon sprite we added. And down below, if we scroll below, we can see our UI prefab slot that we can assign. So let's select our prefab here, flying text. Of course, if we don't do that at this level, it will use the default flying text prefab we already set up earlier, so we can leave it empty. But what we actually need to do here is to change or add the schematic asset here. Okay, so let's select our schematics and add it here. So whenever we refresh or heal our HP, a flying text will be, this flying text will be displayed using this schematic asset to move or to do this animation for us. Bear in mind though that when using schematic asset, this destroy time is completely ignored, so it doesn't matter what we have here. So let's save the changes. Anytime. Exporting package. There we go. So let me go back to the schematic section here. So we were using change UI offset and change UI color, but this is just a way to do things. You can also of course use the standard change position and change color of game object, given that this data key in this case, or the how to access the game object itself, is no longer a UI game object, but it will be just an empty game object in the scene, which is handled by the physical location of in the game world. So when using these nodes, let's take a look, change position. If I were to type properly, we no longer have a data key here, so we need to reference the machine object. In this case will be, but we can access the starting game object in this machine object component or object itself, and later on access the flying text that is going to be displayed as available as a starting object in this case. So there are several ways to do the same thing. Let me remove this one and make sure we change or save our changes. So since we are here, let's make a variant of this schematic. So let's save schematic as, and from here let's select, or let's create a new folder, start clean up this stuff, and let's call this one flying text fade. And what we want to do here, let's remove the offset call or node, so delete this one, and this will be just a dedicated schematic to fade the color. So again, we start by having an alpha of 0, and it will be changing to visible after 25 milliseconds. Then we wait, and then we fade back or make it invisible. So let's save back, and let's make another variant, but in this case I want to start again from the previous schematic. So let's open up the flying text mover, and from here we want to add a new node, so change UI scale, and this is going to be our first node. And in this case we want to change the vector tree type value to 2 units on all the 3 axes, and we want to check the fade, and we want to wait again 0.25 seconds. We still have the UI as the data key and the origin as local. Next we move to the change UI, which we can leave it as it is. Next we move to the change UI color again, and then after the change UI color we want to change UI scale once again. So let's copy this one, let's put it here, and let's link it up over here. So in this case we want to change the UI scale back to 1, and we want this change to be done in 0.5 seconds. After that we wait. Instead of 2 seconds, 0.75, we want to wait 2.5 seconds, and finally we change back the UI color, so we can leave it as it is. So let's save this schematic as flying text scale mover. There we go. So this is the concept of using a schematic to move UI, and after that you can see from the tutorials, the documentation, there are some already made prefabs you can download if you are lazy enough. This is a tedious task, I agree, but there is no way you can learn but to create your own. So let's move on to the next section, which will be the dragging notification. See you on the next one. If you want to see more, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Thank you very much.